welcome in, welcome back, and this is the Legacy Ride. Again, I have Lysander Spooner, but for some reason my new computer just won't let me let me squeeze it down so you can see the logo. Uh, but we have yet another edition for you, another special guest for you, author of a number of books, and a connoisseur of sorts in the commentary of everything of social pollution in society today, which is kind of me and your motif there, Andrew.
Or Forte.
So, yeah, our forte. So, but an author of a number of books, including that of Libertarian Anarchy, and then his latest, which is Hidden Agender, which is the explanation, a little bit of an explanation towards the LGBTQ hidden ordeal, I guess, that you can say that it kind of has. Not to say that you don't have to be trans or anything, but politics, man, politics. So, but again, I am the captain of this enterprise. I am Zachary Kaiser, the legacy of Jennifer and Kaiser. That is Andrew Joseph, my number one, William Riker, or my number two, depending on how I feel. And I just need to go to the bathroom and I see Andrew. Oh, hi, Andrew. So, anything to open up, Andrew, before we bring our guest on?
No, ready to go. Whenever you guys are.
All right. So, well, we'd like to welcome in Gerard Casey. I know he has a number of things to say. We have a number of things to pick his brain about with what's going on socially, systemically, politically, you name it. So how are you doing today? It's this evening, I should say. It's evening over there in Ireland.
Yeah, it's just after 7 o'clock. The sun's going down. Time to get a drink. Just joking.
Right.
I don't drink. Yeah, no, it's pretty good. Pretty good. Yeah, we're getting. I was just saying, telling Andrew there before we came online that we're finally getting a little bit of summer. Because by Irish standards, it's gone up to. I think we had 20 degrees today, which would be what about 70 degrees Fahrenheit. So yeah,
Hmm.
so we're sweltering in the
Right.
heat.
That's perfect weather over here.
I
So
know.
70 degrees is fine over here. And then once it gets to 80 and with 80% humidity, then it's like, oh, it's over. I'm staying inside.
Yeah, I know. I lived in my first job after I finished, I graduated from Notre Dame with a PhD was to work in the Catholic University of America in
Hmm.
DC. And my father-in-law came to visit, and he was in the Irish Army, and they had formed part of a UN contingent in the Congo
Hmm.
in the 1960s. And he said,
Hmm.
you know something? This is worse than the Congo.
Well,
Anyway, they
don't
were
yeah, don't tell my dad that. He's an alumni from Catholic University. Got
really.
his Juris Doctrine back in 70. He'll probably be listening to this. So probably I think what 75 or 76, I believe,
Yeah,
is when he
yeah,
was a
I
Catholic.
was there from 83 to 86. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
So,
So not that far
so
away.
you yeah, you just missed him. You just missed him. He graduated from Ohio State University and then went and got his Juris Doctrine from Catholic University. So good school from what I
Yep.
hear. He
Yeah.
has nothing, yeah, but
No,
he
I
probably
loved
is.
it there. In fact, I was very happy. It's just
Yeah.
these things. My wife and I had children. Never really planned on staying in the States, and
Hmm.
it became kind of the decision time. What do we do? And
Hmm.
uh, you know, I would have been quite happy. I would like living on the East Coast there, all the way down from kind of Boston, from New York, and Washington. There's a kind of conurbation there where there must be, I don't know, maybe something like 3,000 professional philosophers, universities
Hmm.
coming out your ears. I mean, this is pre-internet, so living in Washington, where I had access to sort of nine university libraries plus the Library of Congress, was sort of
Hmm.
like dying and going to heaven. Oh, it was just
Oh
incredible.
yeah.
Oh, it was
It
amazing.
sounds
Yeah,
intense.
it was great.
It it
Yeah.
does sound like heaven though, to be able to
I even
snoop
got to go
and
down. I don't know if you've ever been there, but I mean, so I went. Have you ever been inside the Library of Congress?
I have,
No.
yes.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I
I
mean, it's
went
absolutely amazing. I mean, so
it
you can,
is.
anyone can walk in and call up a book if you're prepared to wait for like an hour and a half or something for them
Hmm.
to get it for you because stacks aren't open. But if you have a genuine need for it, they'll kind of give you half a shelf, and then you can fill out as many slips as you like, and they'll come and put the books on the shelf. At least this is how they used to do it back then. Maybe they do it differently now. And then if you were
Hmm.
really swanky and you were really important, they'd actually give you a room and come and bring the books to your room. And I thought, this is fantastic. But I got to go down into the
Wow.
bowels. I got to go down into the bowels underneath where they have the map section, right? Don't know if you've ever been down there, but it's actually fascinating because they have these huge filing cabinets, I suppose you'd call them, right? But they're
Hmm.
gigantic, and they have these drawers that come out razor thin, as it were, and on them they have all the maps. And I was able to get something from the Ordnance Survey. I think it was 1835 of Ireland, sort of 6 inch, like incredible detail. I mean, you could probably, I think they even mapped the chickens. I mean, it was like that detailed. It was amazing, absolutely amazing. What a resource. It was fantastic. Anyway, there we are.
That's one of my favorite. I went there in like eighth grade for a eighth grade trip, and that was one of my favorite spots when we went there. That and the Smithsonian, of course. But my favorite
Oh,
spot was when we went to the Library of Congress, and it was just amazing just how much was there. It's like you.
incredible. My eldest son, who's an engineer, was an engineer from the moment he was born. And his idea, so we seemed, I sometimes said we visited the Air and Space Museum so often that I think I got shares in it. I mean, he's just like,
Right.
just get on the metro and go downtown Washington into the Air and Space, spend the afternoon there. He just loved it. It was brilliant. Ah, that was great. Anyway, so there we are. Yeah, I loved it. Had a great time in the States. I was the beneficiary of enormous hospitality and friendship.
Mm.
It was great. I loved it. It's the only place I sometimes say it's the only place where I felt more at home than even here.
Hmm. And speaking of home over there abroad, what's it like over in Ireland? I mean, from way back when to now, like what's changed within the last few years?
Well, the thing that's really bugging us right now is okay. So we've got a government. Okay, so I mean, you're familiar with the Overton window. Well, the Overton window has shifted
Hmm.
so far left. There's nobody on the right or even pretty much in the center. And so if we mean you're stuck with obviously a government whether you like it or not. And
Hmm.
problem is if you don't like the guys you got now, the alternative is probably actually even worse.
Hmm.
It's not an inviting prospect. And we, as you do to some extent in the United States, but also we have a huge immigration problem. We've become the number one destination uh,
Hmm.
for people just arriving and so on. And so they have to be put up, they have to be accommodated. They're on the social welfare payroll. There
Hmm.
are tents sprouting up all over the place. It's chaos. I mean, it's not as if every Irish citizen is actually fully taken care of by their own government and so on. So this is a
Yeah.
question of
Hmm.
zero sumness. In other words, what's given there is nobody seems to have any idea how to deal with it. And yeah, it's extraordinary. It's causing enormous friction. And for the first time,
Hmm.
I've never seen this before. For the first time, I've seen public resistance, and then very heavy-handed policing, which again is extraordinary because by and large, traditionally the police force in Ireland, it's kind of they go by consent by and large, and they're not normally armed, but to see
Hmm.
Irish police on the streets in riot dress with shields
Hmm.
against working class people in suburbs of Dublin who are simply saying we don't we like and so on, and villages in Ireland where there are 160 people and they plan to house
Hmm.
250 immigrants. And they're going, this is crazy, and nobody seems to have any idea what to do. Certainly not our government. So yeah, this is
Hmm.
the most significant social and political circumstance we find ourselves in right at the moment. It's extraordinary. I've never seen anything like this in my lifetime.
Yeah, it's amazing the immigration issues that we've had, like all over the world. Like I don't know if it's all by design or if it's just blowback and and coincidence towards everything that our government, as in the United States, has been involved in meddling itself in over the decade, especially the last 20 years. And we're just seeing that consequence of refugees going all over the place. But I mean, I'm one that would say like open borders because I don't agree. I don't understand the fallacy of the state line. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't really exist. It's imaginary. But then you look at this chaos of this refugee crisis and the immigration issues that we're seeing today all over the world, especially in Europe.
Mm.
Um, it's a mess. And I mean, and then you're also seeing citizens being forgotten while
Mm.
having to put up the public dole in order to help, in order to provide for these immigrants, because nobody knows what to do. Like what is your take on that actually?
Well, first of all, I mean, it's well, first of all, I'm a libertarian, so I mean, I agree with you in principle on the
Mm-hmm.
question of borders. The problem, however, is that whether you like it or not, we are where we are, and so we have
Mm-hmm.
states, and therefore, um,
Mm-hmm.
so the states tax their citizens. That's me and everybody else, and then that.
Yep.
So you would think, well, okay, if you're going to do that, that money should be spent. You would think primarily on whom?
Mm-hmm.
On your own citizens, right? That's
Yeah.
what it's a bit. It's almost and but no, it's quite extraordinary. I mean, we're spending a significant amount of money housing people from distant parts of the world. I'm not talking from next door. I mean, they're traveling from Nigeria.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, we're not talking about refugees by and large. We're not talking
Mm-hmm.
about people fleeing war-torn zones, war-torn zones. We're just talking about people who more or less decided, by the way, and also who have come not directly from places like Nigeria or Azerbaijan or so on, but actually
Mm-hmm.
via Greece, Italy, France,
Mm-hmm.
the UK. They've already been in all of these places. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
right now, since they've toughened up, since the last government, we now have a new government in the UK, but since the last government toughened up a little bit, many of those finding the UK a little less hospitable have decided to
Mm-hmm.
come visit us, and they've done that
Mm-hmm.
by going to Northern Ireland, which is part of the UK, and then getting a taxi, and just kind
Yeah.
of arriving here, saying, "Here I am, guys, look after me." It's quite extraordinary. I
Wow.
just like I don't even begin to understand how this is supposed to work. I mean, there are all sorts of issues, but well, one of which obviously is the financial one, but the other one is that they're coming from, okay, so I've coined the term cultural proximity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody, I think seriously, okay, maybe there are a few mad people who are so xenophobic that anybody who isn't, a native is regarded with hostility, contempt, all the right. But most people aren't. And so we have quite a few legal sort of immigrants. In other words, people who come in through the channels and demonstrate that they have a competence or a skill that's required and they live here. So that's by and large. I mean, there may be too many of them and so on. That's another issue, but by and large, it's not a problem. You suddenly have all of these people who are coming from areas where they're not culturally conti contiguous. In other words, they don't share
Mm-hmm.
the same values that we do. And so you've seen, I mean, you see a situation in Sweden where the country is effectively paralyzed, and there are areas that are ungovernable where people are living parallel lives, where there are rapes that can't be prosecuted and so on. And the same is happening
Mm-hmm.
to France. Germany is
Mm-hmm.
I think probably close to collapse. I don't know. And
Mm-hmm.
it's quite extraordinary. Spain, Italy. Um, I've never seen anything like this. This is not it's not funny. Okay. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just, I mean, whatever you think about people moving and free movement and so on, um, there are, if you like, cultural issues, and they're very significant. In other words, it would seem to me, okay, here's my kind of take on this, and this doesn't make me popular here, as you can imagine. I would say, look, um, if you have, forget about the state for the moment, okay? Just talk about a
Mm-hmm.
nation. Word nation comes, it has its root in the word natus, which is Latin, meaning born together. So you're born, you
Mm-hmm.
live together, you grow up together, you share customs, you share habits, you have languages, you have
Mm-hmm.
especially unwritten ways of dealing with things. Okay, fine. Um, so if I can give you an analogy, if you have a let's say an environment into which you introduce an alien species. So, for
Mm-hmm.
example, the rhododendron, it was a plant that's not native to Ireland. It was introduced into Ireland, and because
Yeah.
because of that, if it's not kept under great control, it runs riot. It takes over
Hmm.
everything, grows enormously. So you have a similar phenomenon of what you might call cultural invasion in that sense, where if the native population reaches a stage where it is being outnumbered by people who come from a different culture, you've
Hmm.
changed the whole nature of the nation. It's now the state. It's now, by the way, I don't know if you know this, but 30, only 37% of the population of London are native born English.
Hmm.
In places like Rotterdam and other cities, the majority of the population are foreign born people of Muslim background.
Hmm.
It's quite extraordinary. It,
Yeah,
it's
that is.
it's just it's unsustainable. And even if your guests are, as it were, are prepared to integrate, okay, and in many cases they're not, especially if they're Muslim,
Hmm.
um, you can't do it instantly. It's just not possible. And
Hmm.
this causes all sorts of social problems. It leads to a breakdown in social cohesion. You add that to the economic problems, and you've got a social and political powder keg.
Hmm.
And yeah, I think something's got to be done. This is
Hmm.
not sustainable. Anyway, so that's where we are at the moment.
Do you think it might be, I mean, judging by like the story in the West right now, and it's really not a story, it's true. Like the declining birth rates, excuse me, in the West, could be contributing towards like a design plan for our governments to be utilizing this massive immigration as a ploy to kind of hide the fact that we're declining in our own native populations so that they can have, say, like a worker class in the future, or whatever you may have, like so they could actually have a citizenry in the future to govern, I guess. I mean, could that be the case?
I don't know. I mean, all over the Western world generally, the birth rate has declined precipitously.
Hmm.
Some places more, even in Ireland, where we would have had comparatively high, it's below replacement level. And
Hmm.
so this causes enormous problems. I'm sure you're familiar with the idea that the whole idea of social welfare is a Ponzi scheme. Okay.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
most people who don't know anything about this, if you ask them about it, think that their social welfare contributions or whatever, it's called in a particular state are somehow stored away in a basement somewhere and saved
Hmm.
for doling out. But of course, we all know that that's not the case. That social welfare payments are made out of current expenditure and tax revenue, and
Hmm.
so that when social welfare was introduced into the United States, you would have had something, and I'm speaking from memory here now, so the figures won't be exactly accurate, but you
Hmm.
would have had something like one person on welfare for every 8 to 10 people who were working. So that's a
Hmm.
very large base. Okay, you have
Yeah.
a triangle with a very wide base and a small point. And the benefits, such as they were very small by comparison with what's available today. Um,
Hmm.
and indeed couldn't be accessed, as it were, forever, more or less continuously. You couldn't have a welfare dependent class sort of living on benefits practically forever. We have
Hmm.
people in Ireland whose families are in their third generation of welfare dependency. It's not only that the people there haven't worked, their fathers and didn't work, and their grandfathers didn't work, and so you now have a situation where the ratio of those who are paying into the Ponzi scheme are
Hmm.
shrinking, okay,
Yeah.
and the number of those benefiting are expanding, so that it goes from being a triangle to
Hmm.
something like a rectangle, okay, and
Hmm.
we're very close to making it an inverted triangle. And when that happens, the young people, especially the working people who are paying for this, are going to be asking,
Hmm.
I can't see there being anything for me if and when I
Hmm.
get to the stage where I need any of this. Why should I be, why should I be working uh, to support this huge number of people who are
Hmm.
not contributing to the society? I don't understand. That's another point of social tension. Okay, so in the context then of the question that you've asked me, you could say that the Irish government have at least one of a minister who just retired said, you know, that the scheme is to have, I can't remember what the population is, but it would be something like 8 million, 9 million, where when I was growing up, 4.5 or 5 would have been the case. And the majority of those would be people who are not native Irish, right?
Hmm.
Now, where are they going to live? What houses do they live in? We don't have the infrastructure. Okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
in many cases, so again, if you take the sort of legal immigrants, these are people who come in for particular jobs and have particular skills, great in the health care section, for example, not a problem. But the people who are arriving daily by boat and by plane and indeed by taxi have no skills, right? No obvious skills. These aren't
Hmm.
doctors or engineers looking for work. These are people who are actually on welfare and going to be on welfare for quite a substantial period of time. They are not net contributors to the economy, right? So I don't know how that's supposed to work. I mean, the question
Hmm.
you ask whether this is simply an accident or whether it's by design is not something I've made up my mind on.
Hmm.
Uh, my father gave me advice a long time ago, which was that if when faced with an absurd situation, if you had to put it down to stupidity or malice, to go for
Hmm.
stupidity in the first instance.
Yeah.
Okay, so
It.
hold off on the malice. I'm tempted at this stage to think that this is just this. I was going to say common or garden type stupidity, but actually it's
Hmm.
a lot more than that. It's quite spectacular stupidity, and
Yeah.
whether it's malice, whether it's malicious, maybe there are malicious elements in it. Certainly there are. People have been interviewed, people in the kind of non-government sectors, for example, who have actually gone on record and said, "Yeah, this is our plan." And so on. But whether they're spoofing, or whether that they actually
Hmm.
mean it, or whether even if they mean it, it's something that they can affect, is not something I'm actually competent to judge. But whether or which, it doesn't make any difference in a sense.
Hmm.
The effect is the same, intended or unintended. The effect is the same, and it doesn't bode well. I mean, I'm going to be dead in maximum of 10 years. So in a sense, I could simply shrug my shoulders and say, well, après mal à dédouche. I mean, after me comes the
Hmm.
flood. And sometimes there are days when things are so depressing that I'm tempted just to say that, just screw the whole thing and just get on with what's left of my life. But
Hmm.
I mean, I have children, I have grandchildren, and this is the world in which they're going to have to live.
Hmm.
And so, with what energy and time has got left to me, I'm going to try and do my best to be an irritant, to be a nuisance, to be a pain in the ass on X. So and kind of so in fact I'll finish on this. I I said at the end of last year that I was going to retire from public comment and contributions this year. And so at the weekend I just finished my 6th public appearance. My wife said to me basically, "How's the retirement going?" So I've kind of hinted that I'd like to retire
Uh,
at the end of this year and just kind of quit and listen to my music, play with my grandchildren, read
hmm.
books and so on. So we'll see how that goes. But the trouble is like, oh, I don't know. I said to my wife, why am I always involved in these fights? And she looked at me and said, it's your character. It's you. That's an old joke. I don't know if you've heard it before. Back in the 19th century, in the height of Irish immigration to the US, an Irishman racks up on the wharf in New York and he finds a fight in progress. And he walks over and taps the guy on the shoulder and says, "Excuse me," he said, "is this a private fight or can anyone join in?" So I
Like a
feel
true Irishman.
yeah, I feel that's so
Like a true.
if there's a fight going on, I feel like, hey, let me in. So there we are. Anyway,
Well,
that's enough of that.
I mean, that's fascinating. Like you can you want to you have one foot out and you want to go completely out the door, but yet it keeps pulling you in. And like right now, like Andrew is on this he's on this tenet of studying up on the Enneagram and people's personality traits with like Myers-Briggs, Enneagram, they're all that tri-types. And it would be fascinating to learn what your tri-type is because of that and what your wife has said your character. Like there may be a tie-in to that of why you just won't let it just
I'll let
go
go.
and just go
Well,
enjoy life.
those who know me say it's where I come from. Again, I'm sure you know this. I mean,
Hmm.
every country has kind of stereotypes of the various people who come from different parts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I come from Cork, which is the second city in the Republic, and
Mm-hmm.
there's an old joke which says that a Corkman with an inferiority complex is one who thinks he's just as good as anybody else. So yeah, so uh, we have a sort of reputation for what's the word I want? Not quite for bellicosity, but for hating to lose. I hate to lose. I've lost more fights in my life than I've won, but I've never liked it. Okay. And I hate to lose, and I hate to see injustice, and I hate to see stupidity, and I hate to see
Mm-hmm.
kind of tyranny. And however tempted I am on a bad day, just to kind of say, screw the lot, I'm just going to go, go for a long walk and not come back. I really can't not get involved. So I'm just kind of
Mm-hmm.
hoping if I give enough hints, people will stop asking me because my wife says, all they'll do is they'll just ask you, and you know what you'll say? You'll say yes.
Hmm.
Anyway,
Honestly, I think that's really is the heritage of an Irishman, really. Like I'm Irish by heritage, Andrew's probably Irish by heritage, and like here we are, like
well,
doing
God
a
help you all. That's
podcast,
all I can say.
yeah,
Right.
screaming into the void, saying it's all social pollution.
Yeah, right. Give us,
So,
yeah.
but that's it seems like that's where we're at anymore. It's like we're just screaming into a void anymore, and everybody's in their echo. I think social media has certainly not helped. I think it has to a certain extent, but it hasn't because you have this collection of different echo chambers that everybody wants to be a part of, and they just don't know. Nobody just wants to sit down and just have discourse anymore about the issues. Like at one point, like 20 years ago, like you could be a Democrat and have a civil conversation with a Republican, or
You
vice
wouldn't want to
versa
try that
over there.
now.
Yeah, or vice versa with labor, with the labor and the conservatives over there. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, nowadays, I mean, good luck.
Well,
So,
I would say this that say in a country like Ireland, where your main television and radio service is what they call the national broadcaster,
hmm
which means it's in receipt of funding through a license from the
hmm
government, and indeed a direct subvention this year, which we've all been kicking about. And then only recently did we have other, as it were, TV and radio stations. That's a sort of a relatively new thing for us. Besides which, when it comes to newspapers, which are still read, we only have really two of national importance. And so both those newspapers and the radio television RTE, which is the sort of government sponsored station, all sing from the same hymn sheet. It's all
hmm
it's all so we would have so for us, I would say on balance, social media is a net positive.
yeah.
Yeah.
I take your point, okay, and there are echo chambers,
hmm
but it has made it possible for people who up to now would have been effectively isolated in terms of
hmm
their opinions and would have had, apart from their own particular small circle, wouldn't have
hmm
known that there was anybody else who shared their views to come
hmm
together and to express it. And indeed, so for you know, yes, just to repeat the point, I think it's net positive. I have to say,
hmm
I resisted going on what was then Twitter for many years, and I was
hmm
persuaded by a friend of mine to do so back only in 2022. I've only been on just over 2 years.
hmm
And I thought, no, 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 this is not for me. And he said, oh, come on, I'll show you how to do it. And I said, well, all right, provided I don't want to do any work. Okay. And, I hate the learning curve involved in coming to grips with a new technology. And he said, no,
hmm
no, I'll show you how to do it and so on. And so, yeah. And people ask me why my Twitter handle is Casey5122 dark. What's with the dark? And I said, it's very simple. When I came on for the first time, my first tweet, as it was then, was, I have gone over to the dark side. But for me, it's, I get up in the morning and I just have my breakfast and I come on and I check the papers. I have a subscription to the Irish Independent. I check the Guardian,
Mm-hmm.
it's the English newspaper. That I always say there's nothing like reading the Guardian in the morning for getting your creative juices flowing. There are at least 15 or 20 items on there that are guaranteed to raise my blood pressure seriously. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and then I have subscriptions around the place and so to various other things and stuff comes in and yeah, so that's like 2 or 3 hours gone and then I thought, what the hell, I've got the rest of my life to live, some music to play. Then it's the same thing the next day. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I wasn't sure how it would work out. And I've been very fortunate by and large. Other people I know who've been on it have, are in receipt of like outrageous abuse. I get not that much. It comes in little spurts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's generally inarticulate. It's just incredibly vulgar and stupid from people whose
Mm-hmm.
mind stopped working probably 40 years ago, if it ever did. And so they
Yeah.
just basically ignore it and shut it up. But by and large, I have to say that um, I get I get a lot of responses, but and many of them are sort of occasional and short. But I get some longer ones, and in some cases, I've worked and I still work to a large extent that if somebody isn't in agreement with me and expresses their disagreement civilly and politely, and I will respond in this
Mm-hmm.
way. I don't abuse anybody. I haven't ever responded in,
Mm-hmm.
but I've been tempted. Okay, I have to say. And but if it turns out that they're just just I don't know, trying to egg me on to say something ridiculous, I just bring the discussion to a halt. But so that's not that common, but it can happen. But you're right, by and
Mm-hmm.
large, you do get kind of echo chambers. But at least, as I said, I think it's a net benefit for people, especially in a country like Ireland, where we have a
Mm-hmm.
very small kind of media thing, and we wouldn't have that many alternative sources of news or commentary
Mm-hmm.
wise. So I think, yeah, I'm a convert.
It certainly sounds concentrated, that's for sure. Media, the legacy media there.
Yeah. I mean, I was just looking at it's kind of funny. I was just looking at somebody, I can't remember who it was. It might have been Elon Musk put up a tweet. And in your current circumstances, in this, 100 days out from or whatever it is from the presidential election,
Mm-hmm.
it's quite clear that somebody has sent a memo around to to Democrats and to the mainstream media. And the instruction is whenever you're talking about Trump or Vance, you must use the word weird. Right? Have you seen that?
Mm-hmm.
I have.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
quite extraordinary. And it's weird. And another thing is weird. And I'm going, yeah, sorry, it's not. Seriously, guys, we can see through it. We know that the
Mm-hmm.
memo has gone out. Whenever you're talking about Trump events, use the word weird. That's the thing. What it'll be next week, we look forward to hearing. Kind of funny. So being on social media and on Twitter, it allows you, if you like, to see that. Yeah, it's quite extraordinary. I've also talked about what I call the accelerated apotheosis of Kamala Harris, which is
Mm-hmm.
a phenomenon. I don't know if you've seen it. It's quite extraordinary. It happens in all sorts of social spheres, whether it's in business and somebody
Mm-hmm.
becomes a manager, or whether somebody becomes the Pope or a bishop, or somebody becomes the president or the prime minister. You take somebody who has up to now been regarded as, at best, a kind of an also-ran or a humdrum, workman,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it might be, politician or priest or whatever, and suddenly
Mm-hmm.
they're promoted to high office, and then they become, in this kind of mysterious way, as if they're kind of inspired by the Holy Spirit, the repository of kind of all the virtues. They're endowed with intelligence, attractiveness, good looks, charm, eloquence,
Mm-hmm.
all of these things all of a sudden, and you go, hang on a second, where were all these yesterday? I didn't notice them yesterday. How come they're
Mm-hmm.
all there today? And everybody there, it's like they're all cheering, going, "Yay! Oh no, this is brilliant! This person is such an orator." And you're going, "Well, you can put
Mm-hmm.
two sentences together. Well, that's good, but hey, really, that's it." Okay. Um,
Yeah.
what a powerful thinker! And you go, "Well, no, not really," and so on. So yeah, so that's kind of amusing
It
to watch
is. It
that
is. It's
matter of
It's
apotheosis. It's quite
it's
strange.
it,
very It is very interesting because like it's almost like you saw her yesterday and she couldn't string a sentence together, and then the next day she's sitting there talking about all the policies going down, what needs to be done. It's like, and it's
Well,
very
yeah, that, but
articulate.
I think a large part of that has to do with you get better staff. Okay.
Hmm.
But I was just watching actually somebody put up another tweet and she's being asked a question about inflation and what are you going to do about the galloping inflation?
I just
And
watched
and
that.
more importantly, I mean, how does your bring back whatever it is better or so on? How can you stop that from affecting the inflation? And she goes, well, it's about rising prices.
Yep.
You go, well, yeah, we generally kind of knew that rising prices is a symptom of inflation. And it's about people having to stretch and stress to make do. And you go, yes, and you go, and it's really, really tough. And you go, yes. Are we getting any closer to some kind of an answer here? And then the most mysterious go, well, the Build Back Better program won't cost us anything. It's being paid for. And I go, I don't understand how that works, but and so on. And then nothing whatsoever
Yeah.
about inflation generally. And I go, seriously, this is it? Okay, a lot of hand waving, a lot of pointing of the finger, okay, which is like I'm really making a really important, serious point. It's about rising prices. You go, what? Okay, seriously. This is really deep. Oh
Some people
man.
That's
some people can pull a myth off better than other people, that's for sure.
Yeah, so, but I mean, yeah, it looks. I mean, her handlers need to get hold of her, obviously, and give her, feed her some information, something more than the vacuous hand waving, head nodding, and repetition in 4 different versions of what you just already said of platitudes. But there we are. Okay. Anyways,
I
from this side of the Atlantic, it's kind of entertaining.
Oh, it's all entertainment. I like it actually. I think they picked the best candidate right there because she
They do,
really
yeah.
is. She knows how to take a question asked and then turn it over and then repeat the same question, and
Oh
then
yeah, I mean,
everybody just
it's just like
claps.
a complete non-answer,
Yeah.
which takes a long time. But what I love is the expression on the face. So she'll come up with a platitude. So, and again, to take my example, it's about
Hmm.
rising prices, and then she kind of nods like this.
Hmm.
You've now got the straight poop from me. This is it, right? I mean, you obviously didn't know this before. Well, I'm telling you, it's about rising prices. And we take this very seriously. And go, yeah, sure you do.
Hmm.
So what can I
So
do? Anyway,
speaking speaking of politics, though, the elections in France and in the UK just occurred, and
yes.
they really decided to go to the extreme on the left. What do you think of the political topsy-turvy? I mean, it's no longer it's no longer a show of right versus left or liberal versus conservative. It's like tenfold, like the left has completely obliterated its competition and consolidated its power.
Well, in the UK, obviously, which is our neighbors next door,
Hmm.
they've just switched from having had a conservative government, so-called,
Hmm.
last 15 or 16 years to a Labour government. Now, the thing about the Conservative Party, I often joke that the Conservative Party, sorry, let me start again. I often joke that the Labour Party exists to make radical changes, and the
Hmm.
Conservative Party exists to conserve them.
Hmm.
And so even though they were sort of 18 years or 15, 18, or whatever it is in power,
Yeah.
um, I don't know that they've done anything that's actually would be considered on the right of the political spectrum. In other words,
Yeah.
there may be many things, but I often said somebody should sue them under the Trade Description Act. Trade Description Act is the act we have here, which you can be sued for if you falsely advertise, right? And so,
Hmm.
well, there may be many things, but they're not a conservative party. They're not a right-wing party.
Hmm.
And so the Labour Party's got in, and the Labour Party, to give them credit, will actually do things, okay, things I hate, and so on. So, for example,
Hmm.
in the last UK Parliament, you had a higher education. I can't remember what it was, something Act, which
Hmm.
was passed by the House of Commons and House of Lords and was due to be implemented in 2 days' time. In other words, to be
Mm-hmm.
enacted, right? Brought into force,
Mm-hmm.
which would have required universities to ensure that students and visitors had the ability to speak freely on campus.
Mm-hmm.
Almost the first thing that the Labour government in the UK has done is to say that they are not going to implement this.
Hmm.
Right? Just straight up, right? So that's the situation there. So, I mean, the government runs for a minimum of 5 years unless the Prime Minister calls an election beforehand. But I mean, the Conservative Party was so shabby, so out of ideas,
Mm-hmm.
so disreputable, that they're lucky that they got as many seats in Parliament as they did. Um,
Mm-hmm.
they may make a comeback, but if again, I mean, if when they get back in, they do as little as they've done when they were there, it's hard to say. So again, the Overton window has shifted so much that the the policies that, say, a Conservative Party in the UK would have had, say, 20 or 30 years ago, would now be regarded, even by people in that party, as being
Mm-hmm.
extraordinarily right-wing. And, you go, well, hang on a second. No, it's not. What happened in
Mm-hmm.
France, of course, was very interesting because they have this bizarre system of having an election twice. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened on the first one, it was quite clear that what's her face? I can't remember her name. Uh Presumably the sort of the most right-wing popular party um
Mm-hmm.
was clearly on to achieve an overall majority in Parliament. Um but strategically, because of the way they do things, the other parties got together and withdrew candidates to ensure that they got maximum support for the remaining candidates to keep
Mm-hmm.
so you have a very peculiar situation in France at the moment right now where it's kind of it hasn't proved really possible to form a government uh,
Mm-hmm.
with sufficient stability at the moment. So who knows? I mean, they may have to have another election, but who knows what will happen
Yeah.
then? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
In Germany, the AfD, the Alternative für Deutschland, has been under enormous pressure. They've had their newspaper cancelled because they're guilty of hate speech. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and the existing government would like to close them down and make them completely illegal if possible. Um,
Mm-hmm.
in the European Union generally, places like Hungary, which are maintaining an absolute defiance against the sort of overall immigration policies about having people
Mm-hmm.
for them, are coming under enormous pressure and so on. So you have a very complicated situation here on this side of the Atlantic.
Yeah, I mean, the European Union is looking like it's splintering on everything social and political, and especially with the immigration, and yet at the same time it's consolidating. So it
Well,
really
yeah, I mean,
does.
of course, it's quite extraordinary because while we have a European Parliament, it has extremely limited powers, which in one way is good
Hmm.
because most of them are crazy, right? But
Oh yeah.
nonetheless, the unelected commission, which consists of people sent, if you like, by the different national governments, so the ones that actually control policy by and large, and
Hmm.
they've now formed a kind of super class where their allegiance is no longer, to the extent that politicians' allegiance was ever to their own
Hmm.
people. I mean, that's obviously in doubt to some extent, but to the extent that it was ever true, it's become less and less true. The people they associate with are the people from other countries who all are
Hmm.
hanging around Brussels on enormous expense accounts and having like 5 meals a day and getting fat at the public expense. And
Hmm.
and their attachment to the welfare of their own people is becoming progressively less and less a thing that is important to them. What is much more important is what their European neighbors, or at least the elites in their European
Hmm.
neighbors, think of them. And yeah, so I call this the new European Empire, okay,
Hmm.
which is what it is. And we have a new emperor, okay, Ursula von der Leyen, or rather the
Hmm.
Empress. I want to bring back the old Holy Roman Empire, which is much better, right?
Hmm. It was much weaker.
Well, of course it was. That's why it was much better. You had something like a
Exactly.
thousand 1,000 different polities of kingdoms and
Yep.
dukedoms and fiefs and cities and so on. And it was the legal situation was so complicated that nobody was ever quite sure what the hell was going on, which meant that
Mm-hmm.
individual human beings had a lot of freedom to escape in and out of the cracks.
Mm-hmm.
There used to be an old joke when I was learning history in school. You probably have heard this one, that there were only three things that were absolutely true about the Holy Roman Empire. One, it wasn't holy. Two, it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
Roman. Three, it wasn't an empire.
Yeah, I've heard that,
Yeah.
and
So
it's
they,
true.
yeah, but it was good one.
It's funny because it's true, and
Yeah.
it's probably the greatest dad joke ever, and it's old.
Old but good. The old ones are the best.
Old, but mm-hmm. You can't get away from a good dad joke every now and again.
Right.
So
Yeah, that's true.
so, but what and Andrew, you have anything? You've been kind of quiet, man. I'm gonna make you talk.
Well,
Yeah, he's been there.
I'm just kind of listening and everything. I don't have anything to contribute right now, so I appreciate that.
Oh,
Yeah.
nonsense. I'm gonna add something that you really wanting to. I think I can read your mind at this point. Um, this when we're talking about the immigration issue and
Mm.
everything that all of our governments have kind of, what's the word I'm like, soiled over because of that. What is your thoughts on the idea of like nomad capitalism and using different abilities, different programs, citizenship programs or non-resident programs to use dual passport systems in order to be able to move assets around as well as your person and set up businesses all over the world. Basically, become like an internationalist and go where your hope is to be treated best.
Mm. All right. I'm not okay. I'm not sure how to respond to this one. I mean, okay, first of all, okay, as a libertarian, I'm a free marketeer, right?
Hmm.
But a free marketeer doesn't mean that I'm a capitalist in the sense in which that's sometimes understood, right?
Yeah.
Certainly not when it comes to the situation that we have, um, where
Hmm.
where large industries, those deemed by the government to be quote unquote too big to fail,
Yeah.
recipients of corporate welfare. So
Hmm.
we've seen a lot of that, and so on. So I'm opposed to welfare generally. I'm certainly opposed to corporate welfare. My point is, you
Hmm.
get a business, run your business. You make a profit, you survive. You don't make a profit, you collapse. Okay, and your
Yeah.
resources are divided up and go back and are used productively somewhere else. Um,
Hmm.
so again, as it in sort of in a way that's similar to the situation we find ourselves in regard to immigration. Um, I would, in principle, be happy to allow as there were competition between regions and
Hmm.
different tax rates and allow capital and companies to move and move around and so on. But the reality is, however, that again, you're dealing with a situation where there are de facto borders and where
Hmm.
things go. So, for example, we had a situation where in Ireland we're heavily dependent on foreign direct investment. So our Dublin is in fact the capital, the European core headquarters for Google and for oh God, half most of the
Hmm.
internet companies.
Hmm.
And we had a corporation rate of 12.5%. Right now, I think that's quite high, right? But
Hmm.
and so all of the other European countries were complaining about us. And I was saying, so my attitude, well, why don't you lower your rate to 12.5%? And that's called
Hmm.
competition. Okay.
Yeah.
No, no, no. So when Biden came in, one of the first things he did was put pressure, enormous pressure, or at least his administration. I don't know if he's capable of doing anything, but
Oh, yeah.
his administration put enormous pressure. And so the Irish government collapsed under the pressure and raised the rate to 15%. Right.
Hmm.
I don't know if you know, by the way, our tax rates are just extraordinary. We have the highest personal tax rate in Europe, but
That's
but nothing like the services that you get, for example, in Scandinavian countries. We also have a
hmm
sales tax. A sales tax. Wait for this. What's the sales tax in your area, by the way? Let me ask you before I tell you where.
mine is about, uh, I'd like to say it's either 6 or 7%.
I believe
And
mine is 9%.
Yeah,
yeah,
I think mine's 7.
we call it value added tax, VAT. You know what our VAT rate is?
I'm gonna guess 15%.
No, no, no.
Oh,
25.
23. All right. So, so certain things are exempt, like food, but everything else gets 23. Services are 15%, but
mm-hmm.
goods are 23. So I mean,
Wow.
you earn your living here. You get your tax taken off you, at an upper rate of 52% already. Okay, and with the
Mm-hmm.
money that's left, when you spend the money that's left, 23% of that goes. So, what's one of the things that I find most irritating is gasoline, petrol, right? So when you buy your petrol,
Mm-hmm.
um, you there's a huge duty on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is separate, by the way. And so let's say we're paying at the moment something like 176 a liter, and a liter would be roughly a quarter of a gallon, give or take.
Mm-hmm.
So you're looking at something like 6.80, $7
Mm-hmm.
gallon, right? Uh, most of which, about 55% to 60% is duty, right? In other words, if you took the duty
Wow.
off, you'd be
Yeah.
paying something like 70 cents, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you pay VAT on top of that. No,
That's
so
right.
you pay
And
VAT on top of the price, which is computed, including the duty. You pay 23% on the duty.
wow.
It's quite
And
extraordinary. It is quite
and then
extraordinary.
and then they wonder why, I mean, you're not getting a whole lot of productivity out of
Well,
everybody
yeah, I mean,
and
in a sense,
people's poor.
you get to a certain stage where your marginal when you
Mm-hmm.
reach the higher income bracket, which is actually quite low by international standards, even by the UK standards, and you're wondering, should I put in some extra hours and make some
Mm-hmm.
extra money, and you work out how much of it is going to come back to you, and you're basically
Mm-hmm.
trying to say, well, screw that. I think I should stay at home, okay, and
Mm-hmm.
play with the kids.
Exactly.
Hey, why would you do it? It's not rational. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yeah.
we also have a very peculiar thing. I'm not sure what the technical name is this, but if you have shares, okay, I can't remember these kind of share accounts where you kind of buy into a basket of shares in various goods, right? You have it and you put your money in,
Mm-hmm.
it goes up and down, so on. And if you allow and you want to let your money there and you want to, say let's say you're young in your 30s and you just want to let this kind of accumulate and so
Mm-hmm.
on. In Ireland, after 7 years, you are deemed to have realized your assets and you have to pay capital gains tax, whether in fact you've actually realized them or not.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite
Wow.
insane. So
That's wild.
one of the things that this does, of course, is it discourages people from investing in the stock market and
Mm-hmm.
and invites them if they and since the banks aren't giving anything like a reasonable interest, it invites
Mm-hmm.
us to put your money into things like real estate. And that, of course,
Mm-hmm.
simply adds fuel to the fire of soaring real estate costs. It's
Mm-hmm.
just, I mean, is anybody thinking here? It's quite extraordinary.
It's a death
It
spiral.
doesn't. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's quite bizarre. I don't know. Sometimes I just think, oh man, we live in a strange world.
I don't know. It's either strange or it's a clown world, but
I
either
don't
way,
know. Yeah, I
it's
just think,
very weird.
yeah, you have all these people telling us what to do, and I'm thinking, you don't know what you're talking about.
hmm
You don't know what you're doing.
That's
Yeah.
where I'm on the case point of it being somewhat by design. There, you have somebody in the shadows r rooting these idiots as our politicians that are in
Yeah.
charge of everything, and then the masses are just indoctrinated into like this is just reality as it is, and we get stuck in a circle. As Andrew said, we get stuck in a death spiral. Like it's just never ending. I mean, stupidity and insanity. I'm like, why? Why do we
Well,
allow
no,
ourselves to?
You may well be right. Okay,
Yeah.
I wouldn't rule it out. Okay, and but well, whether it's just incompetence and stupidity, or whether it's by
Hmm.
sinister design, the results
Hmm.
are the same. Okay. My when I came back to Ireland and was taking up my position in the Department of Philosophy in University College Dublin, the head of the
Hmm.
department, Professor Michael Nolan, said to me, Mr. Casey, he always called me Mr. Casey, he said, Mr. Casey, he said, in politics, he said, the basic principle of politics is the peasant always pays.
Hmm.
And I thought, absolutely, I've remembered that ever since. The peasant always pays. And as when I'm speaking to audiences, I have to say, and by the way, without intending to insult you, I have to tell you all, you're all peasants. Okay.
Hmm. Not insulting me, I already know.
Yeah, right. You're a peasant, you're always paying. So,
Hmm.
yeah. Hmm.
That's why a little bit of it is. I mean, I think most of it is just the silliness of this world that we live in is just pure incompetence of our rulers and our leaders.
Yes.
But at the same time, I do actually have to say, like, history is repeating itself, and like these elite classes that want to maintain their elite status and get back to where their families used to be when we were like in feudalism in old world Europe. And I mean, so where the peasants paid everything and worked the land, they want that freedom of theirs to where they can just kind of lounge up and rule the peasants and kick their feet up and drink
Well,
old
I mean,
mead and whatever.
no, you're right. We may have dispensed with hereditary nobility and gentry and all of the rest, so there's still quite a few around in
Hmm.
the UK. But we've got a new class, a new kind of permanent, a new kind of set of dynasties. I mean, if you look at it in
Yeah.
terms of actual function rather than title, I mean, the nobility came into being because they were functionally those people who were in charge, right?
Hmm.
And that's how that happened. The same thing here is our political dynasties, the families that are there, the people who are like permanently in
Hmm.
the Senate, like Biden for 50 years. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
He's never done anything in his life except draw from the public dole. It's quite extraordinary.
Yeah.
And so we have the same thing. We have no term limits on our politicians. They can be there for 20, 30, 40 years. And then they kind of acquire their family acquires a kind of a semi-noble, I'm now talking about in a functional
Hmm.
sense, status, so that their sons or daughters will inherit the seat. And so the dynasty sort of passes on. And the same thing is true to
Yeah.
some extent. I mean, it's a little bit more mobile, obviously, than you would have had in the past, but nonetheless, it's the same basic idea. And
Hmm.
uh, and so they're all there. So now we have a European layer sitting on top of us. Okay. And one of the
Hmm.
things I love about the EU is that their accounting system is, to put it mildly, less than perfect. So substantial amounts of money kind of go unaccounted for. And
Hmm.
and everybody shrugs their shoulders and goes, well, these things kind of happen, and going, well, hang on a second, it's huge amounts of money. The main reason for the foundation, by the way, of the European Union under the Treaty of Rome, as it was in 1960, was to make sure
Hmm.
that the farmers didn't turn into fascists again. Okay.
Hmm.
And so we have this common agriculture policy, which takes up something close to 50% of the EU budget. So that farming now isn't so much a matter of tilling the soil and looking after the animals, it's a matter of filling in forms, okay, and getting
Hmm.
grants of various kinds. It's quite extraordinary. Uh,
Hmm.
and indeed, in many countries in Europe, they're actively discouraging farmers and making it impossible for them to produce food and so on. It's
Hmm.
quite, you've seen that in the Netherlands and in other places. It's
Hmm.
quite extraordinary. But if you can
It
figure that
is.
one out, if you can explain to me why all of this is happening, I'll be very happy to hear it. But I'm just looking at it with my jaw dropping, going, I don't understand what's happening here.
But history
Climate
rhymes with
change.
Donald Rumsfeld, September 10th, 2001. So
Say that again, Andrew. I think your
I, I,
microphone is.
I said history rhymes with Donald Rumsfeld, 2001, September 10th. All that money that just disappeared out of the sector, out of the National Treasury, and 9/11 happened. So
Yeah, yeah. No, no,
Hmm.
it's quite extraordinary. I remember once I was at I was at the Mises Institute in Alabama, and and Auburn, and there was a presentation, a dual presentation by a man who's an economist and his father who was a rancher. I don't know where he was, Wyoming or someplace like this. And it was very, very funny because we got the practical perspective on what it was to actually be somebody in the agriculture and tillage and side and the experience. And so the rancher guy was able to demonstrate that the US Department of Agriculture was willing to pay him twice, once to do X, whatever that was, and once not to do X. It was effectively, he said, I don't know what these guys are doing. He said, but they're both happy to give me money from two different sides. It's like weird. But there's P.G. O'Rourke. Have you ever read P.G. O'Rourke? By the way, he died a couple of years ago. A humorist, Republican Party reptile, and various other things. Fantastically funny guy. But he said, the four categories of spending. He said, it's when you spend your own money on yourself. He said that's why middle-aged men get Porsches, okay, and Lamborghinis, okay. It's when you spend your own money on other people, and that's why people get socks for their birthdays and Christmas. There's when you spend other people's money on yourself, and he said the sky's the limit. Go for it.
Oh, yeah.
And he said the biggest category of spending in governments is other people's money on other people. And he said, in that case, who gives a, and then you can put in the word there, right?
Yeah.
And I thought, yeah, that's
That's
it.
fun.
It's other people's money on other people who gives a.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's like the old story of I'm not even gonna bring it up, Andrew. I might cut a promo, but it's the old story of the Rothschilds with their Nathan's old quote of give me control of the money supply and I care not who governs. I mean,
Absolutely.
I mean, if it's my money, it's not my money. I'm gonna do whatever I want with it. So.
Well, Glenn will be here 20 minutes.
I'm not gonna cut a promo. I could cut a promo for days. So
how are we doing, guys? Have we exhausted the subject or topics?
Yeah, I think
what we do?
we've had a good program.
So one more, yeah, I think from there, I think we are coming up to that hour mark. So, and we always typically go overtime, but we try to hit that time. But I guess the final question that I want to the final subject I want to touch base on is get your perspective on the spiritual and the religious factor of our society and what has happened to us as a culture within our religious aspect. I mean, it's one reason why we're in a decline because of the lack of spirituality, or is there much more to that than just the religious aspect?
Excuse me. Well, I think okay. The short answer is I think yes, but it needs a bit of nuance. So clearly, I think it was Chesterton who said, "When men cease to believe in God, they'll believe in anything." Okay. The problem is that if we have human beings have a kind of an inbuilt desire for transcendence. Think of it how you will. I mean, I'll give you an ordinary example. I mean, people follow sports teams. So here, for example, or in the UK, you'll see 60,000, largely men, turn out on a Saturday afternoon to cheer on their football team. And if you've ever watched it, it's quite interesting. They come early, and they're wearing the gear, and they've got scarves, and they sing. They sing more or less continuously from the time they arrive until they leave. It could be for 4 or 5 hours. And why are they doing this? You think, I mean, and they pay money to do this, quite an extraordinary amount of money. Who are the people that are watching are making like millions. Okay, these guys are normally working class people and so on. And why is this? Well, because the answer is, I think, because for that short period of time, whether it's 3 or 4 hours on a Saturday, they are sort of taken out of themselves. their own narrow lives, their own narrow concerns, making a living, paying the bills, doing the job.
Mm-hmm.
They're taken out of that and they become part of a larger whole, okay, of something that
Mm-hmm.
is really, really important to them, which engages their passions and their hopes and their fears and thrills them and depresses them alternately and so on, but which makes them feel alive. Okay. And I'm nothing against that, by the way. I don't have any problem with that when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
rugby. I'm the same. Hey, I mean, you should see me, right? I mean, it's like my wife says I have to leave the room when you're watching these matches. Anyway, uh, so so I understand how that is. But the point is, as a culture, we don't really seem to have a transcendent point of focus, uh, generally speaking. Okay, and therefore, when you don't have that, the kind of energy that would normally take and which would order your life and put it in perspective and keep things in control, right, tend to get diverted and diluted. So I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I think, for example, the demographic problem we're facing in the Western world is, in part at least, a result of that. It's not so much to do with the fact that women don't want to have children. In fact, when they do surveys, they find out women do actually want to have as many children as before, but they leave it so late
Mm-hmm.
in your 30s that so that even if you go out gung ho, you have a maximum maybe two and maximum three. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but but in a society which is ordered towards a transcendent life, your life is important, but your life has it's in a timeline, okay, which reaches into your past and your culture, and you're the carrier, and you bring it forward into your children, and that brings it on. And children are not, even though children are financially a burden. There's no question about it. I mean, that's been the case since
Mm-hmm.
100. I actually wrote a paper on this once. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But to, to think of children primarily in that way is fundamentally to misunderstand what's going on. I mean, I used to joke to my students in my first year philosophy class. I said, I have four sons, and the cost of, in fact, it was the US Department of Agriculture which came up with these figures. Cost of bringing up a child to the age of 21 was something in the region of, like, I don't know, $300,000 or $400,000, maybe more. And I said, okay, so let's take it that's the case. That's four of them. That's kind of like 1.5 million. What could I have had with 1.5 million? Well, I could have had a much better car than I'm actually driving at the moment. In fact, I could have several of
Mm-hmm.
those. And what do I get when I have four sons? Well, I get presents with money that I've supplied. No, so you think about it in that way, right? The whole thing collapses. You can see why. You think, well, I mean, I can spend my money on myself and I can spend it on holidays and I can do other things, or I could
Mm-hmm.
have children, and then there's a lot of trouble and a lot of care and concern and resources and so on. And if you don't see it in the kind of long-term perspective, if you don't see it life as having a meaning that extends beyond your life forward, you could even do this in a
Mm-hmm.
secular fashion. It doesn't even need to be particularly religious.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can see why the having of children is going to collapse. By the way, this is not the first time in history this has happened. One of the first things that Caesar Augustus did when he became the first emperor of Rome was to insist that Romans should marry and have children, because they
Mm-hmm.
weren't doing it. And you know what happens when you don't have children? It means that your armies get manned by people who are not Romans. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
when the Roman Empire collapsed or came to an end in the West in the 5th century, it wasn't because the barbarians had suddenly crossed the borders. They'd crossed the border a long time ago. In fact, almost
Yeah.
all the soldiers in the Roman army were barbarians.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite extraordinary. And the taxes, by the way, had risen, and the inflation was so bad that the people in the towns who were responsible for civic order were fleeing into the country and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, all of these things are there, and it's when you kind of lose your take on things, you lose your view of what's important. You don't understand the importance of family, of culture, of society, of tradition, and indeed, and of religion, at least in the social sense. I mean, there's obviously a transcendent order which extends way beyond what most people would be probably concerned with, but it has a social effect, and therefore the lack of a really practiced and lived out religion is going to have social effects. And I think we have seen that. You've seen it much less in the United States,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, because you have a different order of practice there. But in Europe,
Yeah.
certainly, where, say, for example, something like, I don't know, 8% of people who are in France who are Catholic will go to Mass on a Sunday. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we're still up around 50 or 60% in Ireland, but it's gone down from
Mm-hmm.
95% when I was a boy, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
declining. So yeah, you have a culture that's in crisis, and that really is the root of the problem. And religion is a large and significant part of that culture.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like every time you have negative effects in society and politics and spirituality and I mean and economics, that's when you start seeing a decline in cultural phenomenon within just livelihood. So, I mean, it's inevitable. I mean, the only way that you can kind of write it out, and that's probably a black pill to say that, but you kind of have to you kind of have to write it out and kind of just do what you can to fix get your own life in order and your own and maybe extend that to your family and then your
Yeah.
community and hope for the best on that because the future well, like you said, like this has happened before. Rome wasn't built in a day and it collapsed pretty fairly quickly. So we're at another crossroads of Rome. So but
Yeah.
you
Well,
gotta have a dark
somebody said if you want to save the world, start by saving yourself. Okay, that's
exactly.
probably a good way to go. But the other thing I've noticed, of course, and I see this, by the way, in um, the different ways in which the very polarized political class in the United States between the Democrats and the Republicans, the
Hmm.
way in which I've seen demonstrations. So I've seen people demonstrating against, say, like Trump rallies, and the language and so on is quite extraordinary and it's vicious and so on.
Hmm.
Whereas on the other side, you don't see the same thing. And I think part of the
Hmm.
explanation for that is that if you think about it, if you think that this life is all that there is,
Hmm.
right? And there is nothing else. And that if your children, if you have any children, it's irrelevant and so on. And
Hmm.
but this is where it all happens. If you get to a stage where you see things not going your way or where there's a danger of them not going your way, it can induce a kind of desperation,
Hmm.
which would account for some of the viciousness that you see. Whereas if you have, as it were, a more culturally embedded and grounded view, which looks to the past and looks to the future,
Hmm.
you have a certain confidence that, okay, things may not be going the way I want them now politically, but okay, we live to fight another day, and if not me, then my children will live to fight another
Hmm.
day. And so the battle will kind of continue. It doesn't all have to be
Hmm.
done by me. And therefore, there's a more relaxed kind of attitude. It's not that we don't think these things are important, but we
Hmm.
don't, we don't, they're not the be all and the end all of life. And I think that to some extent explains the kind of difference that you see in the various, as I said, divided political establishment that you have in the United States.
Yeah. I mean, amen to that.
Well, there we are.
Amen. So, amen to that. So, with that, Andrew, you got anything any rebuttals, concerns, responses, questions?
I just appreciate you visiting us, sir. Thank you very much.
Not at all.
Yeah. Thank you again, Mr. Casey. It was fantastic to have you come on. I'm glad that you answered the call when I asked you. So it was awesome to get you to share your perspective on everything. So
No, it's
and
a pleasure.
maybe
Pleasure to talk to you guys, both you guys. Yeah, very pleasure.
we'll definitely have to do this again. So we'll definitely have to do this again.
All right.
So
Don't
if
leave
you'll
it too
have
long. I
us.
might not be around.
So we'll try not to. So, but
Okay.
um, but with that, you have Twitter, obviously. Is there anything else? And all this
No,
will
oh
be in
yeah.
the
Sorry, I mean, you might give
description.
my Twitter a
But
handle to boost there. Just to
yeah,
repeat for people, if you want to get on. So it's
mm-hmm,
at Casey, that's with a capital C, capital CASEY,
mm-hmm,
5122, and then
mm-hmm,
DARK. So Casey 5122 dark. And
mm-hmm.
so on. So come on board, send me annoying tweets, and we'll see how it goes.
So
Right.
anything else you would like to plug, website or
No, I don't have a
no?
website and I don't
Okay.
have any other social media. So that's pretty much it,
Mm-hmm.
really. That's
Mm-hmm.
my exciting life.
But as far as like books, if you want to read Gerard Casey's books, Amazon, most certainly you could probably go to them. If I'm incorrect, there might be more, but obviously Amazon. I think that's where I got your Libertarian Anarchy, anyways. was
Yeah, and
Amazon.
that's pretty much it. I don't know that I don't know that any self-respecting bookstore actually carries these.
So, but
Yeah.
but check out his books, go to Amazon, everything, his Twitter handle, follow Gerard on Twitter, add him, tweet him, argue with him.
Yep,
He'll argue back with you if you're civil. And
that's right. Just remember,
so
remember, if we disagree, I'm always right.
That's right.
exactly. Just remember that you are wrong if you argue. So, but this has been another edition and a great conversation on the legacy, right? Like and subscribe us on YouTube and leave a comment if you want to join in on the conversation. We don't want to just be having a conversation with ourselves. We want you to join. So add a comment, add a question, and we'll be able to expand on it. So, or if you think that we're all wrong, tell us that we're all wrong. So, but and then follow us over on wherever you find the Legacy Ride at in wherever podcasts are. So, but I am the legacy of Jennifer and Kaiser. I'm Zachary Kaiser. That's Andrew Joseph. Thank you again, Mr. Gerard Casey, for coming on. Um, Andrew, let's get on this magic carpet and take a ride and get on out
That's
of here.
right.
So,
Thanks for watching.
God
See you
bless.
guys later.
mm.
Peace.